Something that's going to be really interesting is how all of us are going to be viewed in 50 or 100 years. For a lot of us, especially, like me doing videos and putting them up on the internet, those things will stick around forever. I often wonder how my grandparents, went through a depression, certainly through the Nazi regime that came up during the Second World War, things of that they went through, the Korean War and other things. I don't know where their stance was. I imagine, that they were pro-American and were not, any part of any fascist regime or anything of that nature. And I certainly know that they were all about thrift. And I do remember them saying that one thing they didn't do was use credit. But there's very little I know about their ideology or even how they navigated those times. I know that my grandmother actually had a nervous breakdown, but these are things that I don't know the specifics of it. I don't know what tools she used to move through that. My grandfather hurt himself very early on in his career as an oilman, not out on oil rigs, but delivering oil. So don't think it was a big thing. But he ended up, having to work very limited jobs from that period, and I don't know how, they navigated that as a couple. I don't know how he navigated that, as a man, a fairly young man, with 2 young children and a wife during the Depression. That's a lot to have to deal with, and so part of my reason why I do these videos, honestly, is because I wanna leave a record. I wanna leave a record for perhaps myself, but also my grandson. But it's really interesting if you've been one that has kept up with journals or anything, to every now and then take a glimpse back, and you only wanna take a short little glimpse, but if you take a look back to see, who you were, 5 years ago or 10 or 20 years ago, and you understand, wow, we had a lot of growth to do. And if you are a conscious person who is always striving to become more understanding and to take in more wisdom, I think we're always going to think that. You're always later on down the road going to realize how much more we really had to expand and how much more we had to learn. Because one of the interesting things about learning things, one of the interesting things about education, one of the interesting things about if you are a seeker and somebody who really wants knowledge is that the more information you take in, the more wisdom that you take in, the more of an understanding you have of how little you actually know. And it's interesting. Like you know, you might know more than you knew, but your capacity to understand how little you actually know grows. So the percentage becomes even larger of your idea of just how little of a percentage of what's actually happening that you actually are aware of and actually have any kind of inkling about. But I just want to, perhaps cautionary or maybe even just a call to keep in mind that, you know, anything that you've said online, anything that you've done, that sticks around. And how do you want to be known? Keep in mind that whatever you do here in these spaces, this is gonna be one of the first really times in history where things are gonna stick around digitally probably forever, probably never ever to go away. And with the, advancement of AI and different things, it's gonna be easier and easier to, capture this data and sort through it and find it. And that's not to scare anybody. It's just to really call an awareness, really call an intention, really call a focus of what do you want to be known for in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years and 40 years? Some of the decisions you make today may be very much in the moment. They might benefit you temporarily, but at the end of the day, what does that look like? In 10 years, do you want to be known more for your ability to just kind of fit along to get along? Or do you want to be known more about your strength and your resilience and perhaps your faith in knowing that if you went with your gut, if you went with your instinct, if you went with what you knew was correct rather than what was expedient, or perhaps even, what perhaps made uh, intellectual or sense, so to speak, although your heart and your body and your soul were telling you no. Which do you want to be known for? I know I want to be known for one who takes, I was going to say risks, but for me, if you step into your intuition, that's actually the least risky in a human sense and feels the most risky. But from my 62 years of experience, I've found the more times that I listen to intuition, the less risky that it's actually been. It may have looked risky because, faith, I've often said, looks like a glass bridge over a wide chasm. So it looks like you're stepping out into nothing when actually, if you're stepping out into intuitive faith, if you're stepping out into the grace that I believe the divine opens up for us, you're always held, you're always caught, especially when you're moving along with your intuitive sense of what is the next right move. And, that's interesting because sometimes the next right move is to simply breathe. We very much have this Western model of we have to have constant action and we must always have the answers and then we have to fix it. When sometimes if we just rest and be and really exercise our faith and our knowing that everything is always working out for us, sometimes things just you know, kind of find their own lane and we find the right sense of it. So, anyway, just to call out to myself, perhaps to call out to others, to think about, how are you going to be seen in 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 100 years? How are your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, posterity, perhaps, someone else studying some type of social type of study, how are they going to find you? What are they going to think of you? How is that going to look? How are you going to look at you in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years if you're alive still then? How are you going to look at it? And what are you going to think? So be mindful of that. I know I'm being mindful about that, about how this looks. That's why I've decided that my channel is not about likes or subscribers, although that's great. If you like and subscribe me, that's amazing. If you don't, that's amazing. It's more about my authentic walk and me showing up with what I'm intuited to really feel like talking about at the moment. And this is the ramble that, thank goodness they say the grandpa ramble is popular now because I'm a grandpa and I'm rambling. So anyway, I hope that's made any sense. I know it's helped me. I process a lot of times by talking out. My office mate today was talking about how she'll be working on something. And next thing she knows, I've been babbling for 10 minutes and not really to anybody in particular, perhaps just kind of working something out through the sound of my voice, which is probably pretty irritating. And God bless her for being able to sustain that. But anyway, I guess I'll let the ramble end right there. And until later, love, peace, and release.